Hi, I'm David Miller, and along with Tammie Cumming, we are the co-hosts of Next Generation Assessments Web Bites. And today we are going to be talking about the COACHE Survey, or the Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education.
Thanks, David. And hi, everyone. I'm Tammie Cumming. I'm the Associate Provost at Brooklyn College for the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. And it is my pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Todd Benson, who oversees the COACHE administration at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. We are impressed with the work you have been doing with COACHE, and we've been looking at that and providing faculty with a voice and ensuring systematic evaluation of climate for the faculty. And we're particularly interested in that because we also have been doing some work with survey work with our individual campuses, as well as with some new assessments that we've been developing around DEI climate. So, but what we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about your work with COACHE. So could you elaborate on the importance of assessing and addressing faculty concerns with respect to the different areas of faculty life, such as feelings of inclusivity and institutional tolerance of the difference of opinions?
Sure. And let me start maybe by talking a little bit about kind of why personally I get excited about COACHE, and then I can talk about what I think we do to affect those things. I joke a lot about this, but the truth is I was a terrible undergraduate student. I was just awful. And the only reason that I made it through a bachelor's degree, the only reason that I was able to even get into a master's program, the only reason I was able to get my doctorate is because I had faculty who put themselves out for me, that took a little bit of extra time to help me to straighten out when I wasn't doing a particularly good job of that. And so for me, and I was just telling somebody this story the other day, the day before I got my doctorate, I emailed all these faculty who had just these little touch points in my life that were important in just my ability to thrive and succeed. And so I look at this as paying back to those folks. Now, what does it mean about inclusivity, institutional tolerance of different opinions, and about faculty life in general? What does that matter? Well, if those faculty who were helping me out didn't feel safe or welcome at their institution, if they felt excluded from their department, they're spending a certain amount of energy on being in a workplace that doesn't feel welcoming to them. That takes time away from their ability to be good advisors, good mentors, good teachers, and good scholars. So when we think about having a welcoming workplace, a lot of it is just getting some of these barriers out of the way so that good people can continue to do good work. And I think that matters a lot. I would also say, from a DEI perspective, and again, I was just reflecting on this a couple of days ago. I did not have a faculty member of color until my master's program. That says something about my experience as a white guy. But I wonder what it feels like for students of color. And I really do believe that representation matters. And it's not just about numbers. It's about them feeling like they can be their authentic self. And anything I can do to support that work, I'm absolutely going to do.
Wow, thanks so much for sharing the story, Todd. I think it really resonates with people. Faculty aren't there just to get the research numbers up and have a certain class full-time student to full-time faculty ratio, but it really does make a real impact in each and every student's lives. And so, I kind of want to come to the second question that I have, and that's, how do we empower the faculty? How do we make them feel secure and that they can take the COACHE survey, realize it's worth their time, return on investment will be high if they go ahead and give their opinions on the items that you ask? How do we motivate them? What are some of the strategies that institutions can use? I know you can probably talk a whole day about this, but what are some of the things that we really need to emphasize if we're going to have a decent response rate that we can have generalizable for the institution, actionable data.
And I'll say, first things is that high response rate doesn't necessarily mean that the data is represented. There are a lot of colleges and universities in this country that could have a 60 or a 70% response rate that's all white men. And that's not telling the full story of your faculty. And so it's not just about a high response rate, but it's about being representative of the full institution and figuring out ways to make sure that all folks not only feel like their voices are valued, but that the institution is going to do something with the data. So when we talk with our partners about this sort of thing, we focus on a few different, I'll call them tactics or strategies. And the first one is really thinking through your audience, and not just faculty, as a single word or a monolith, but faculty as a broad range of people in different stages of their careers that come from different backgrounds, that come with different goals. And how do we make participating in the COACHE survey something that means something to all of them? So a couple of the strategies that we use, first is that it shouldn't all just be coming from the provost or the dean. There are just faculty who don't open messages from the senior administration, and that's okay. It's just the reality of where they are. And, I'd love for them to change that, but we gotta start with where we're starting. And so, bringing in somebody like the chief diversity officer to send out messages might resonate differently to faculty of color. Having representation from different disciplines, having not just, the kind of the data geeks that are excited about looking at, an SPSS file, but thinking about, how does this affect faculty in the humanities? Or how does it affect faculty in professional studies? They're doing these things for their faculty in some ways for different reasons, and they're having a different experience because of their departments and their institutional context. So our job is to figure out how to message to them in a way that's going to resonate. And once we are able to do that, then it's more likely that they're going to participate. And then the last thing that I'll say about just the COACHE survey and really any assessment of faculty in general is that on the whole, faculty don't think their institutions are going to do much with the data. And that's problematic for a lot of reasons. And I think it's actually it's funny, but not really, that at the end of our survey, we asked faculty, do you think your institution is going to do anything with the results? And the faculty who completed the survey, the majority of them said no. And so, and these are people that took 25 minutes of their day to do this. And so the way that we've found to work around that is to really convince faculty by demonstrating and documenting the process that you're going to take when you get the results in. And so the benefit to that is twofold. First, you're making a compelling case to faculty to say, we're going to work through these steps. And that at least conveys to them that you've thought about it, which a lot of times faculty don't necessarily believe that. But then the second component to this is that we're kind of building in an accountability structure. By us making you document what your institution is going to do with the data, your faculty now have something to kind of hold you accountable with. You said you were going to share these results by, October of the following year. Where are they? Is not the question that they want to, that the administration wants to be answering. What they really want to focus on is this is what we learned from the data, and this is how we can make things better. And then the last thing that I'll say about this is that assessment as a whole, whether it's COACHE, whether it's Harry, any assessment that you do with your faculty, they kind of come across as very high stakes. And what I mean by it's the final exam is the way that it feels. And what we've been trying to do with our partners more is to try and think about conversations with your faculty about the workplace more like your annual physical. Yeah, you're probably going to play a little bit more on the scale than you want to, and you're not excited about that. But it becomes routinized so that it becomes healthier because you're talking about these things all the time. Bob Keegan wrote a book about deliberately developmental organizations, and one of the concepts that he talked about was this idea of constantly priming that feedback pump, constantly asking for feedback, constantly getting people to exchange with each other. And the regularity of it makes the conversations feel more authentic.
That's fascinating. I'm particularly interested, and I don't think we even have time to go there today, but at the idea that I think you're right, that the faculty have this notion that nobody's going to use that data, and at the same time that somehow they feel it's high stake, which implies use.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fascinating to me that people are often sort of have both views at the same time. But which is a great, interesting thing to watch. Let me sort of ask you though a follow-up question, which is if you're watching this video or any other way, you decide that, gee, this is something that we ought to be doing at our campus. This is something of interest to us. How do they get started? Where do they go? I know that we use a different set of surveys at UF. But I think it's sort of good to think about the campuses that are not necessarily doing these kinds of activities and thinking about where would they get started on this.
So I think that the crucial thing, again, whether it's COACHE or anything else, is that we have to start asking more, and we have to do it in a way that feels authentic to both the folks that are trying to assess the climate and the folks whose climate is being assessed. And so one of the things that I try to push when I work with our institutional partners, or even when I talk to folks that aren't involved with COACHE, is this whole idea of creating a climate where difficult conversations are expected, and knowing that they're difficult, but that we won't get better at those conversations if we don't have them regularly and authentically, and not in a time of crisis. Crisis assessment, and I think every institution, in addition to dealing with the joys of the 2020 pandemic and the migration and all the challenges that came along with that, they were also surveying everybody to death. But you can do that. You can do that because at the moment, faculty felt the salience of it. It's harder to do that when it's just a, hey, how are things going? There's no kind of crisis necessarily. And then the last thing that I would say, and this is kind of something I hear on politics podcasts all the time about, how do you make a campaign work, is, tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did. And that it's so simplistic, but it's exactly right, because faculty have to feel themselves in the process from the beginning. You have to say, I'm making a commitment to you that I'm doing this work on your behalf, or better yet, in conjunction with you, that we're partners on this endeavor. Then we're going to do the work together, and then we're going to circle back and we're going to say, here's what we learned, and here's how we're going to be different because of it. If we can get people to really, faculty and administrators, to make a better connection between the data that they collect and the changes and the progress that organizations make, there's just a much better, I think, climate around the importance of assessment, around the way that the institution values its community members. And I think that faculty will feel as though the institutions, for lack of a better expression, have their back.
Yeah.
It's hard to ask for feedback. I say this an awful lot. When a provost signs on to COACHE, they're kind of asking for people to kind of complain at them. And I don't mean that. I don't mean to say that the COACHE data is complaining. I just mean that, the feedback they're going to get is, how do you do things better? By nature, that means you're not doing as well at this as we want. And so it takes a certain amount of courage for provosts and associate provosts and deans to put themselves in that place. So how do we make it more effective with faculty and with administration? We do it by kind of taking away some of that stigma that goes from having these hard conversations, and that only comes from practice.
Yeah, that's really a great perspective, and I'm glad you brought that up and emphasized it, because really it's a partnership, and there's a amount of trust that the faculty have to have that the administration are actually really going to use the data within their control. Some things faculty might not be happy that in all practicality cannot be changed in the short run. You don't like your office or something like that. That can be something very difficult, especially in my university where real estate is difficult to, to expand or whatever. But one thing I want to not let go under, as a fleeting comment is I really like what you brought up, because survey research services is something that falls underneath what I oversee as associate provost. And the first thing I'm usually asked when we conduct a survey is, what was the response rate? And I'm really happy to hear you say, it's not just the response rate, but does that represent the population? And I think people who are involved in this do need to step back and say, because it's one of the first steps we always take, is we take a look at the population that we're interested in reporting about, take a look at the respondents in the sample, and does it kind of mirror that? So I'm really happy to hear you bring that up. And return on investment wise, if your administration is listening to the faculty and respect their voice, then they should be doing something actionable and accountable for that. Hold their feet to the fire. We're going to report in October, as you mentioned, they do. Here's what we're going to do. And then they report later on to show this is what we did and follow it up. What was the impact? So I really love your model. I think that it's been taken very seriously at the City University of New York system. I highly recommend COACHE. We've been doing it on a 4-year cycle, but it's been very, very helpful. And I've seen a lot of progress in faculty trust with administration and just bringing that team together. It's more important now than ever, actually, when colleges are suffering economically with enrollments being down. It's very, very critical. And I think it couldn't be more helpful, Todd, in many, many ways that were unanticipated.
And I'll just to kind of just riff on what you were saying there, is I do think that it is more important now than ever, but we're also so constrained by resources, by time. I wrote this in a piece for the National Academies last year that, I thought most institutions were already operating at 110% capacity. And then we underwent this massive transition in modality, and we circled back and we never even de-escalated. We never said to ourselves, okay, well, now we went from 110% to 130%. I wish organizations could figure out how to get, a little less than 100%, because it gives you space to think and process, and maybe just to celebrate a little bit the work that you do. I don't know if the kind of the hurry culture that we see in definitely in higher ed, but I think in a lot of other spaces too, gives us time to pause and reflect. And I wish institutions could figure out how to do that more.
Mm-hmm. Seems to me like if you're going to have that time to pause and reflect, at least at our public institution that I'm in, that saying we're going to reduce the percent is not going to be a viable solution, but that perhaps the viable solution is in including the pause and reflect as a part of that percent, and making sure that we're really clear about our priorities for those kinds of activities. And if it becomes a part of the activities and still is a part of the percent, as we reported out, we'll probably have better luck getting it in there.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes you don't want these conversations to be performative. And in order for them to be authentic, it does take time. And it's sometimes, I think, because of the typically frenetic pace that we are all working at these days, even pausing for a little bit can feel uncomfortable. And I just, but we have to kind of push through that uncomfortableness, I think.
Couldn't agree more. This has been great. Thank you so much, Todd. I know you have a very busy day. We appreciate you taking the time from your schedule to talk with us. I think this will be great for everyone who is interested in surveying their faculty COACHE surveys. Thank you so much.
Yes. I'm so thankful that you invited me, and I'd be happy to come back and ramble some more if you ever want that.
Yes, thank you for spending the time with us.
Take care.